What will the Cardinals roster look like in 2023? I'll tell you what, it's going to look different.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Locked On Cardinals. Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Please go like, subscribe, turn the notifications on over on YouTube as well. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen each and every day, free and available on all platforms. The Arizona Cardinals roster will look very different in 2023. Front office, different. Coaching staff, different. What is next with free agency looming? You've heard me talk plenty about this, about the Cardinals trading back, accumulating draft capital. What are the Cardinals going to do with Byron Murphy and Zach Allen in free agency? Are they going to bring over James Bradbury? Is this going to be Philadelphia Eagles West with Jonathan Gannon coming over? I'm getting my buddy on today, who used to write for the Cardinals, knows them better than many in the Valley, Mr. Kyle Odegard. Dude, thanks for coming back. Thanks for hanging out. How's everything going?
All good here. How about you?
I'm doing well. So a lot has happened since we've talked last. I think I had you on before the season started last year. First off, Jonathan Gannon et al., Monti Ossenfort et al. What grade would you give Michael Bidwell for what he's done with the front office and coaching staff so far?
Easy one's incomplete since we can't see anything yet, but
right.
It obviously wasn't a perfect hiring cycle. Like, they didn't get the GM that Michael Bidwell wanted. Who knows exactly what happened with Sean Payton, but it certainly feels like Sean Payton passed on the Cardinals. So could Jonathan Gannon and Monti Ossenfort work out? Sure. And I do like the early returns. I like what they're saying, but the proof will be out there in the next couple seasons. But they didn't get the exact candidates they wanted, I don't think, for either spot. So I guess a C would be my grade for now.
I mean, I think it's better than what we saw in 2022. Kyle Odegard at Kyle_Odegard from Compare.bet. He did a mock draft 2.0. I mean, how many mock drafts are you going to do before the draft? Are you going to be 14.0 over there at Compare.bet? Like, how many can you do without your brain just turning into mush?
I've only done 2, and we're already in early March. I think I'm pacing myself quite well.
Yeah, pacing early is easy. I mean, once you get closer to it with the different options. But I understand. We'll talk about that in the second segment here. Free agency-wise, Byron Murphy, Zach Allen are 2 hot-button names. Neither of them were franchise-tagged, obviously, as that deadline is passed. Byron Murphy has shown 2 Pro Bowl halves of the last 2 seasons before getting injured, and then the wheels falling off last year with the Cardinals. Zach Allen came in last year, and he played like a player in his contract year. It's not an original story. If you're to pick one to retain, is it Byron Murphy or is it Zach Allen if you're the Cardinals?
That is a good question. I think Byron Murphy has a longer track record. I think I've seen more highs out of Byron Murphy. So you're right. Zach Allen played really well last year. It was 1 season of productivity. Does that mean he was healthy and ready to take off? Maybe. And I think, is Byron Murphy's back injury a true concern? Was it more like, I'm not playing because I'm hitting free agency and our team's going nowhere? I don't know the severity of it or what's going on there, but all things being equal, I think I would take Byron because I do think that he's an above average slot corner. He can play outside in a pinch if you need him to. I think he's a valuable player. Haven't seen that as long with Zach Allen, so I'm a little reticent to give him, big money. I think I'd lean toward Byron.
Yeah, and it's interesting because especially with my foot in the ground, the Cardinals must trade back to accumulate future draft capital, where they can trade back and draft a Christian Gonzalez, draft a Devin Witherspoon. Like, Byron Murphy has been on an island since his rookie year, with Patrick Peterson getting popped for PEDs for the first 6 weeks and then never really regaining form. Like, he's kind of been by himself, and that's one of the positions, as you very well know, Steve Keim just forgot to add talent to year in, year out. And I feel like with more of a strength foundation, he could flourish where maybe he won't be the CB1, but I just still don't think he's going to garner CB1 money. It's interesting. I said Zach Allen just because it's going to cost a little bit less, and he may be able to help the run stuffing, help the pass rush in more of immediate fashion. Now, there are 5 untouchables that I talked about yesterday for the Cardinals roster. Zach Allen was one of them. I brought up Zach Ertz and James Conner as well because I feel like even though cutting them post June 1st would add about $10 million worth of cap space, those two guys have kind of become de facto lifelong Arizona Cardinals like immediately. Like they're in the culture. James Conner's been one of the most productive running backs we've seen when healthy over the last 2 seasons. Do you think that they're going to be Arizona Cardinals come week 1 of 2023? Or is this going to be a full-on tabula rasa, clean slate Arizona Cardinals in name only?
I think those two will be here. I think they're, like you said, they might save a little bit of money if you post June 1 it, but then you're just paying more 2 years from now. And I don't think you want to push a bunch of dead money onto 2024. So I don't love James Conner. I think if he had a cuttable contract, I'd cut him, but he doesn't. They gave him basically a 2-year guaranteed deal, and it's going to be hard to get off of that. Same thing with Zach Ertz. I think Seekheim overpaid for both of those guys last year, and it's going to be hard to release them. So I think they're staying. I think if you look at obviously D-Hop, he seems to be gone. An interesting one to me is DJ Humphries. Like if you believe Josh Jones can play left tackle, DJ Humphries is a solid left tackle that you can get something for on the trade market. You can save some money. If you're trying to tear this all down, maybe it's more than just D-Hop. And to me, Humphries is the natural one to trade as well.
Do you think that if DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown played meaningful snaps together last year, that this would be a non-story and that he'd be running it back? Or do you think this was inevitable regardless because with Kyler Murray going down and them having a high draft pick, it's time to just reset?
Yeah, I think we had one game, I believe, with them together against the Chargers, and they looked pretty good against the Chargers on offense. So it's the big question. Would Cliff be here if those two guys are on the field together, if Kyler didn't get hurt? But I think where you're at right now, it certainly feels like they're going to really rebuild this thing, tear it down, and it makes sense. I mean, you've got a lot of roster holes. They have the second longest odds to win the Super Bowl. Only the Texans are longer. Like, you can think of a lot of bad teams, and everybody but Houston is above the Cardinals. So from an unbiased perspective, nobody thinks they're going to be good, and obviously Kyler will miss games. So it makes sense to kind of tear it down. It would have been great to see Hollywood and DeAndre together, and I'm still kind of wondering, like, if you don't get an early second-round pick, if you don't get a late first, could you bring it back and just see what it looks like? Probably not, but that's kind of my hope.
Yeah, that was my biggest fear going into last season was they wouldn't play. I mean, that's just because it's for the football fan and everybody. Like, imagine those two lining up together. Now, I need to ask this, and as I titled this podcast, the Cardinals roster is going to look very different in 2023. This hodgepodge of a first thing with all these names coming and going, it's like this could be, again, Arizona Cardinals in name only moving forward as the Arizona Cardinals 2.0, just chapter is upon us. Is Hollywood Brown, they already exercised the option. He's going to make under 15 mil this year. Like, if he puts up okay numbers and Kyler Murray plays half the year, are they going to pay him $20 million a year for the next contract? Like, let me ask you this. Is there worth in potentially shopping Hollywood Brown also? Like, how far down do we need to go here watching the Cardinals as they just, unravel everything that Steve Keim did?
Yeah, it's such a tough sell because I realized Monti Ossenfort did not give up the first round pick for Hollywood Brown. But Michael Bidwell was here when it happened, and would he let you trade Hollywood Brown for a lot less than you just gave up for him a year ago? The optics would be bad. I thought Hollywood Brown played well. I think he's a 1B. I don't think he's a number 1 receiver, but I think he's better than a 2. I think he can give you 1,000 yards. I liked what I saw from him. I would keep him in build. He's young. He's got potential. He could be a nice high-end number 2 for you. I don't love him being your number 1 if they trade Hopkins. I don't think the wide receiver core will be that good if that happens, but I think that's a bit too far. I think you need to keep some of your young guys. Hollywood Brown, somebody I would keep.
Agreed. And I think one of the only positives as we pivot towards the draft is one of the only positives to the Cardinals doing what happened in 2022 was Hollywood Brown doesn't have any real leverage to get a contract extension this season, just like DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, and Deebo Samuel did, all of whom share the same agent. That's like one of the only upsides that came out of last season. Kyle Odegard from Compare.bet joining me here on Locked On Cardinals. What the hell are the Cardinals going to do in the draft? Are they going to trade down? Are they going to stick and pick with a potential transcendent talent in Will Anderson? We'll talk about it next. Locked On Cardinals. FanDuel. Listen, midway point of the NBA season, it has come and gone. We're in like the home stretch before the 6-month playoff run, it seems. It's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Kyle Odegard of Compare.bet joining me here, Locked On Cardinals. Oh, man. Wrote for the Cardinals for a long time. It must be interesting to still be kind of at a bird's eye view from when you were on the ground for so long. Just for you quickly, before we move to the draft, is there like finally now we can heal kind of situation with Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury gone? Or is this just a different avatar of the same organization?
No, I think it definitely feels like that. It felt borderline toxic there at the end, and there was just so many stories and so much tension, and a lot was going on in that environment for a while. So I think it does make people take a deep breath, and we'll see how it goes with this new group. But to me, it's like refreshing to hear Jonathan Gannon talk and Monti Ossenfort talk, and it's new guys coming in with optimism, and it feels like the fan base is a little bit more excited now. I think when those NFLPA report cards came out, it brought a dose of pessimism, because you realize that Michael Bidwell is a big part of this thing. And if your facilities aren't up to par, that's going to affect your product. Other things are going to affect your product from an owner perspective. So you've got that to deal with. But yeah, from a GM and coach perspective, I think definitely it feels like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I said the Cardinals have hit rock bottom, and that's the best possible thing that could happen. They cannot move any further backwards. And this isn't like it's the Cardinals, don't tempt me. There is zero backsliding that can happen from what we've seen really over the last 20 months now. It's been nonstop incessancy of a 24/7 news cycle of not so great Arizona Cardinals news. So moving towards the draft, the future is bright. The Cardinals now, with Anthony Richardson really becoming a force in this draft, trading back from number 3, in my opinion at least, seems like the only move, because the Cardinals don't deserve to draft at number 3 overall. One player is not going to help them. And what you did, and I look back, and Jody Ayler from Fox Sports 910, one of my former associates, also had the Cardinals trading back to number 9 with Carolina. And you had the Cardinals trading back from number 9 to number 9, getting a first rounder in 2024, and then getting number 61 this year, which I think is the perfect scenario to stay in the top 10, get a player of consequence this season, stack another pick in the second round, and then have another probably top 15 pick for next season. How did you land on this package trading back to Carolina in your mock draft, most recent one?
Yeah, well, I had the Colts moving up to number 2 and the Texans moving up to 1. So I think obviously those two teams, the Panthers, the Raiders, and the Falcons, those are like the 5 to watch. And it makes the most sense that Houston and Indy will be up there because they're the closest to the top of the draft board.
Right.
So it's just a matter of, would the Colts move up to 3? Will they stay at 4? And if they're not moving, if they're not pushing for the Cardinals pick, which of the other 3 teams? Maybe it's foolish, but I saw Cam Newton dominate a lot with Carolina, and Anthony Richardson kind of has some of those parallels with what he does. Obviously, as an owner who wasn't really there for the Cam Newton prime, but a lot of people probably in that building or around them remember Cam Newton and how dominant he was. So to me, it makes sense. I think the Falcons are definitely another team that would be interested. I still feel like the Raiders and Will Levis make sense because the Raiders love strong arm guys. So that's a natural pairing to me at 7, and they could just wait for him probably. Next mock draft 3.0 would probably not be the Panthers, but as it stands, I think Carolina does make sense to go up to 3.
So say those two teams do move up to 1 and 2. Do you see a world where the Cardinals just stick and pick and draft Will Anderson or Jalen Carter if things listen, when news come out like this 6 weeks before the draft or a month before the draft, it's not as potent as it is Laramie Tunseling 10 minutes before the first pick is made. So, do you see Jalen Carter, Will Anderson going to the Cardinals at 3 as a real viable option?
I don't think Jalen Carter will go to them at 3. I could see a trade down and then Jalen Carter lower, but if Will Anderson is on the board, I could definitely see Will Anderson still going. I mean, he's a premium edge rusher, and you just look back to Nick Bosa in the Kyler Murray draft, who went number 2. You got a guy who's a dominant edge rusher, and you got him under market value for 5 seasons. That's super valuable. And you're right, they have a lot of holes, but if you can get a premier edge rusher on a rookie deal, it's still a really good value. And then you can make it work and try to address the other holes in different ways. So I understand trading down, and obviously I did it in the recent mock draft, but I definitely think Will Anderson is a very viable option at number 3 because he's so good and because he plays a premium position.
Get you out of here on this, Kyle Odegard of Compare.bet. You are Monti Ossenfort in the draft room. Will Anderson is there at 3 in the April draft. And you get offers to trade down for the exact package that you mocked. Which is the better move for the Arizona Cardinals for the next, say, 3 or 4 seasons? Kyler Murray's contract, what's the best move for this team?
I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would have said take Will Anderson. I've kind of shifted my thinking. I follow analytics a lot, and I've read a couple articles on how the draft is a crapshoot. The draft is a crapshoot. Even though you think Will Anderson is a can't-miss generational prospect, he might not be Nick Bosa. And if he's not, then it hurts you. So if you have, like you said, 2 first-round picks next season that maybe both are in the top 10, and you have the number 9, and you add a second, more bites at the apple to me is a good thing. You mentioned how many holes there are on this roster. I think it's a very tough call, and I could totally understand taking Will Anderson at 3, and I could totally understand moving down and collecting more draft capital. If you get blown away by an offer from a team that wants a quarterback, I think it's an easy decision. But if it's borderline like that, either way is fine with me. I'm not gonna hot take it either way because I understand the rationale on both sides.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a win-win no matter what. And sorry, I just blacked out. If the Cardinals trade back and get 61, they have their second pick. Maybe they get a second for DeAndre Hopkins. There's nothing to say that they don't trade back into the first round and get another first rounder with 2 out of those 3 second-round picks. Trading back opens up opportunities, and that's something the Cardinals haven't had over the last 5 seasons. They just haven't. Steve Keim's made bad decisions. They've kind of hamstrung themselves, and now the world is their oyster.
Yeah, like you said, if you have number 9 and then you have 3 second rounders, and next year you have 2 first rounders, you're acquiring premium draft picks, and the draft has been such an issue for so long, and we've seen it in this roster. I mean, they signed some high priced vets that worked out, but then when guys broke down and got injured, it all fell apart, and you need to rebuild it through the draft. Kyler Murray's going to get expensive, so you need cheaper guys around him. I think accumulating draft picks is never a bad plan. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, and this is either there's no safety net, it seems like, with the Cardinals organization now. It's young, it's a first-time GM. This is a high wire act without a safety net. So it's either going to be incredible or it's going to be exactly where we were a minute before Monti Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon got hired. Kyle Odegard, Compare.bet, one of the best minds in Phoenix now covering all the NFL. You'll always be the red-bearded brethren for me covering the Cardinals. Really appreciate your time, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was Kyle Odegard. Coming up next, I'm just pretty much going to recap what we discussed because there were a lot of nuggets in there that I think are going to be fascinating. I'll talk about that next. Locked on Cardinals. All right, final segment, Locked On Cardinals. Alex Clancy here. That was Kyle Odegard. Really, really interesting stuff. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. So Kyle said a couple interesting things. He would choose Byron Murphy over Zach Allen if you're going to choose one, and I understand that. He is kind of split with the trade back or stick and pick, because with the trade being, the draft being such a crapshoot, it makes sense. Like, there's no such thing as a sure thing. Even if your favorite pundit out there is saying that this person is a sure thing, we have no idea. So with the cliche, getting more bites at the apple, if the Cardinals can accumulate draft capital in the first and second round for this year and next year, that's how you rebuild a roster. And what the Cardinals have needed to do over the last handful of years, but they've just been prolonging it, is build the roster organically. Build the roster as winning organizations do. And that's through the draft with timely free agent signings. That's how you do it. Talent, being good talent evaluators, drafting those talented players, coaching those talented draft, those players in the draft to make them solid / Pro Bowl NFL players, and then add, potentially high-end free agents, add veterans to build out a roster that is not only deep, but sustainable. The Cardinals' history of putting Band-Aids over cracks in the foundation has got to, them to where they are right now. And that's why, even though, drafting Will Anderson, potentially transcendent talent, absolutely. And if it works out and they draft him, fantastic. But if you're able to get another first-round pick, especially from a team like Carolina, where they're going to be a top 15 pick next year, plus a second-rounder this year to trade back 6 spots, and I didn't mention this because I was excited just about the trade back. Kyle, in his mock draft, he has the Cardinals taking tackle Paris Johnson out of Ohio State. If you don't protect Kyler Murray, none of this is going to work. I will go back to that. So all in all, what Kyle discussed is kind of, a lot of what I've talked about with you. This roster is going to be different. This team is going to look very different. This season, especially if Kyler Murray misses a lot of time, is going to be it's not going to be a loss. And that's a very clear distinction that needs to be made. This year, it's not about win-loss. It's about culture shift. This year is about cohesion. This year is about player development. This year is about making the Arizona Cardinals a stable organization. And if they win some games, great. But again, I always go back to Dan Campbell in Detroit. Nobody cares about the win-loss record the last 2 seasons for Detroit. Everybody cares about what Dan Campbell is starting to do with that organization. Now, in year 3, sure, win-loss is going to be a lot more heavily weighted. But if you tell me that these Detroit Lions from 2022 are even close to any year that we've gotten up until this point with that organization, I'd say hooey fish. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. 2023 is about stability building. 2023 is about the culture shift. 2023 is about Jonathan Gannon planting his roots and building a team with the best opportunity to win for the future. So trading back could be the best catalyst, the best jet fuel in an effort to set the Cardinals up for success in the future, while focusing on 2023 and their ability to start to build out a stable roster with a good culture in an effort to change the trajectory of this organization forever. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. I'll talk to you tomorrow.